Welcome back to the Athletes Podcast. This is episode 133 featuring Nick Shaw, the founder and CEO of Renaissance Periodization. The man is a beast, whether it comes to his physical abilities, what he's consuming as far as mental, 50 plus books a year, you name it. Nick Shaw has got what it takes to be one of the most incredible human beings that this earth has ever seen. Bring it back. Sophomore year, he meets Dr. Mike Israel, who founded RP with him. 10 years later, they're actually celebrating their 10-year anniversary this year. The guy has trained Olympians, UFC fighters, Navy SEALs. He actually got into weightlifting at the age of 13 years old with his older brother, who was 4 years older than him, throwing around some weights, those plastic ones filled with sand, and he just started lifting. And you can see it in this video here today. He is built like a brick house. He's got years of experience as a bodybuilder, power lifter. Now he's impacting hundreds of thousands of other people through the RP Strength app. And he's addicted to the idea of self-improvement. And for those who listen to the entire episode, you will 100% come out of it with more knowledge and wisdom around how to better prepare yourself in whatever your athletic pursuits are. Whether you are going for a 5-second 40-yard dash, or you are trying to drop 100 pounds and get from 300 to 200, whatever your athletic pursuits are, you can take actionable insights from this conversation and directly have it impact your results. I highly recommend you check out RP, their website, renaissanceperiodization.com, their YouTube channel, wherever you consume the Athletes Podcast. Please, please, please drop a like, hit that comment, subscribe button, whatever you got to do. Share this with others because I do think this will be an incredible episode for those who are listening to provide value to others within their network. He talked about it. You are who you interact with on a daily basis. And if you can continuously progress yourself, it's only going to better those around you. And that's a pretty incredible opportunity to have. Folks, this is the 133rd episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Nick Shaw. Here we go. One of the interesting things is we try and feature, pro athletes, coaches, whoever on the Athletes Podcast that can provide value, educate, entertain, and inspire that next generation of athletes. But it's not always glamorous and amazing to showcase what athletes are doing on a daily basis. And people see it on magazines and, up on walls, and you've been in those photos yourself. But all they see is that end result, and they don't necessarily see the amount of work, dedication, discipline that goes into it. You mentioned 3 key tenets for successful people in a recent article you published, podcast, that was internal focus, thinking long-term, and then the slight edge principle. I'd love for us to begin here by breaking down each one of those, maybe into a bit more detail and peeling back the layers of the onion.
Yeah. So the first one is, do you focus on things that you have control over, or do you focus a bit more externally? So a good example for athletes would be, let's say you're lining up at the start of a race. I'm just going to use track as an example. Where are you so focused on what the person next to you is going to do? That might not be the best thing. Or like CrossFit Games competitor. Well, you worried that, hey, they're going a little bit faster, something like that. You kind of let that locus of control be focused somewhere else. It's not necessarily something you can control. And so then, well, what good does that cause you? Or, what good does that do for you? It doesn't really do much of anything. It's mostly better to be focused on hey, what can I do? I can control, my own breathing, my own pacing, et cetera, all these things. You can't control what someone else does. So if you put that locus of control or focus, a technical term is locus of control, but it's like if you actually replace the L with the F, you get focus, and it's actually a really good way to phrase it too. So it almost doesn't matter. Do you focus on other people or on what you can do and what you can control? And a lot of times when you focus more on what you actually have a say and control over, you just get a lot better outcomes because you control all those things. You control how you think, how you breathe, how you react, all that. And a lot of times the top athletes really are very well practiced and very well versed in that. You can imagine being a professional athlete, let's say field goal kicker in front of 50,000, 100,000 screaming fans that want you to fail, want you to mess up, or half of them do, I guess. Or like, you're going to shoot a free throw in a big game, there's 25,000 people, rooting against you, like waving their arms frantically, doing everything they can. You can't control any of that. But what do you see time and time again? You see these people are very, very like specific about the exact details that they do, the number of steps that they take and move back if you're a field goal kicker, or the exact same routine every single time. They bounce the ball 3 times and they spin it, take a deep breath, and then they shoot, like, because those are all the things they can control. So they know they can always fall back and rely on those kind of rituals.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you brought up track. I know that was one of your sports growing up before picking up powerlifting and bodybuilding in a more serious way. How do you think that knowledge and kind of that sport itself allowed you to think long term for this next tenant?
Well, yeah, so it's really interesting because I have a really good example. So my son is 10 years old, and each Sunday I go to the track and run with him. And it's just
Okay.
like a mile. And in our local high school, right outside of the gate was like the list of school records for the track. And I kind of pointed it to him, and I pointed out a few of them. And now it's like a pretty big high school around here, so the times are really impressive. And he's 10, right? So he's got, the next 5 to 8 years to kind of work on that, whatever, if he chooses to stick to running. But I was just like, think about how well you could do compared to that if you keep sort of working now. So that was just, it literally just happened yesterday. So that stands out as a really good example, because for me, I always saw that. And we actually had a junior high record board and a high school one when I was in school. And I went to a small school, so the times weren't like super, super impressive. But I would always stand there in the gym, like in our gymnasium, and I would always look up and I would be like, yeah, I want to get my name on one of those boards. So for me, that was like the ultimate long-term thing of like, oh, I've got 4 or 5 years to work and train for this. Like, yeah, I probably won't get it next year, but where could I be as a junior or senior? Like for me, that was always how I thought about it. I was like, well, that'd be really cool. Like someday I might be able to get there. And it just sort of starts with putting in that work day in and day out.
So true. And I know that you're one that's said a couple of times that the journey is the struggle. It's not in your nature to be average or ever wanting to settle. And I'm sure that kind of goes back to our third tenet and point here being like that slight edge and doing whatever it takes to have that slight edge over your competition. Is that what you refer to there specifically?
A little bit, kind of, the slight edge to me. So it's a book written by Jeff Olson. I highly encourage everyone that's listening to go get a copy. It's a phenomenal read, but it's almost like you do these little things every single day. And I think bodybuilding is a really good example, because if you're, 18 years old, and let's say you want to just get stronger and put on more muscle, that's not happening anytime soon. But what can you do? Well, you just focus on hitting the meals in front of you for that day. You focus on that one training session, or maybe it's 2 training sessions in that day. And that's all you do. Do you see any results from one day? No, not really. I mean, you can't really tell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you could, like, if you track things the right way, and you're like, oh, I did, 200 for 10 last time, and this time I did 205 for 10, like little things like that, of course. But like from a meaningful, like adding muscle standpoint, you can't tell. But it's like the slight edge is really just continuing to do those little things each day. And then you sort of look at the end of your mesocycle, which is, from 4 to 8 weeks, let's call it. Well, like, well, now maybe you do see some little differences. And then over, the next 3 months or 6 months or a year, you just keep applying that slight edge and putting in that work every single day, even when it seems like you're not really doing that much. And then at the end of the year, you're like, holy crap, you look back and oh, wow, 5-10 pounds heavier and I'm a lot stronger. And, hey, I look about the same. So that's a pretty good indicator that I put on some muscle, lean tissue. That to me is what it's all about. Like you just keep doing those little things. And if you give yourself enough time of continuing to do those, you start to get that compound effect over time. And the compound effect is probably a better phrase or term to use when it comes to like personal finance, because you don't get that in sport. Like it doesn't compound quite like that.
It's so interesting. It is, a finance term that people have tried to bring to sport, and it does to some degree, to your point, make sense, but you're not going to have increased gains the same way you might in the stock market with your index fund. Nick, I'm so excited for those who are listening to this conversation. Obviously, as the founder and CEO of RP Strength, also known as Renaissance Periodization. You guys have an app, an incredible website, hundreds of thousands of users. I'd love for you to maybe bring us back to the beginning, meeting up with Dr. Mike, founding RP, and to share kind of what that journey has looked like to this point now, to where we are today, mid-July, where now you've got some exciting news, partnering up with the CrossFit Games and a couple other incredible items on the agenda.
Yeah, it's funny because we're kind of coming back like full circle. I've realized that recently. Like we love fitness. We love helping people, get in better shape, get leaner, lose weight, get healthier, all that good stuff. And the idea was we would just coach people because we loved it. It's just what we love to do. I mean, I still love fitness to this day. I started lifting when I was probably, I don't know, like 13. I was trying to tell that to my son because I'm like, he's 10 and a half now. I'm like, man, in like 2 years, you're going to be like at the stage where I got started. And I was like, wow, that's like blew my mind, really. And because he's getting a way earlier start than I can, but like it just goes back to that love and passion of I just love fitness. And because I love the idea of the slight edge principle, and I didn't even know that was a term back in the day, but to me, it was always just like with fitness, you can't fake results. You can't fake anything. It's literally just a direct outcome of essentially how much time, effort, hard work you put into it. So to me, that was always a cool thing. And then, whatever, I met Dr. Mike at the University of Michigan. We were both into lifting. He convinced me to try powerlifting, and I just needed a competitive outlet because I wasn't running anymore. And I was like, yeah, sure, sounds pretty cool. And I was just immediately hooked. And yeah, he kind of took me under his wings, and we trained together, and we wrote a bunch of programs. Moved to New York City where we were personal trainers for a little bit, and then started online coaching. And it was a decade ago. We're actually on our 10-year anniversary for RP this year. So we never had any grand intentions of making it this, big thing that would help, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. Like it just goes back to, we love fitness. We just want to help people, and everything else has really just been gravy.
How many Excel spreadsheets are you working out of nowadays compared to when you started 10 years ago?
So do you mean like the templates that we use, or just like
Well, it was a twofold question because I'm sure you're probably having to work with just as many, if not more. But I know that at the beginning it was templates specifically, and that's where it all sort of stemmed from. What maybe as a follow-up question would be better is, how has the development occurred? Obviously, you as an athlete didn't necessarily maybe have the back-end knowledge of creating an app and all of these grandiose ideas. How has it gone from Excel spreadsheets to now 10 years later impacting hundreds of thousands of people is maybe a better question.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And, we still do work a little bit in spreadsheets and stuff like that. But yeah, so, we weren't VC backed or anything like that. Just, real small startup. But we knew that we had the systems and processes in place to get people in really good shape. And we thought that we could sort of automate it and streamline it into some type of digital product. So we created these clunky Excel files way back in February of 2015, and they turned out that people liked them. And it was a more affordable option than hiring someone to coach you full time. And they really started to take off. And we didn't even have them automated at the time. Like I literally manually sent every single one for the first 3, 4, 5 months of their existence. And then once we got them automated and sort of people could just come in and enter their own information and they would be automatically sent, like it was phenomenal. It really sort of allowed this, kind of like hockey stick type thing to go on. But at the same time, we knew that those would probably have some limitations. They're like a static file. You can't really interact with them. They're dumb, and I'm making air quotes over here. But like you could make an app that could theoretically take the input and feedback from a user and then modify it along the way. The best analogy is really like a paper map versus GPS. Well, which one do people want, right? You want the GPS because it can tell you exactly where to go, or if you fall off track, it can reroute you around construction or whatever. So that's really, I guess, the best analogy for like the evolution of the templates into the app now, because it's just a much more interactive thing. And that's what people want. People want apps that can, take your feedback and your input and all that stuff and then make recommendations for you.
One of the things I love going through your social media pages is the transformations that you guys are able to produce on what seems like a daily basis. I'm sure you've got a couple that stick out as you're smiling there that are maybe top of mind, or that you go back and reference. You're like, man, like we were able to directly impact this human being's life. And like obviously to your point, 10 years ago, you didn't have these insane ideas to get to this scale, but here you are. When's that like aha moment, or when was that first aha moment for you? And does it still occur?
Yeah, a little bit here and there. So just off the top of my head, I won't name any like specific names, but the transformations that I think really stand out to me the most are the ones where like someone starts at 300, 400 plus pounds, let's call it, and they use RP for multiple years. And then, 3, 4, 5 years later, they're 200 pounds and they're like really into lifting. Like it's fundamentally changed their life.
Mm.
It's changed their health. It's changed by the people around them, I'm sure. Like that to me is the coolest thing you could possibly do, because you've taken someone that is not healthy at all, probably going to run into some serious issues down the road. You've probably extended their lifespan by 10, 20, 30 years, perhaps. And
Mhm.
now I'm sure there's like that network effect of like now they're into it. So now maybe the people that weren't into it before, you kind of feed off of the people that you're around the most. So like now that person has changed everything that they do. So like now they're sort of spreading healthier habits to all the people around them. Like there's a multiplier effect in some capacity there. And that to me is like the coolest part. The aha moments, I think there's a couple of them that stand out to me. Is one, when we created our first ever ebook in
Yeah.
2014. We probably had, I don't know, let's call it a couple hundred clients at the time, which is pretty cool, pretty good. Like obviously that's awesome. But we sold like 1,000 copies of that ebook in like the first few days. Oh, that was a light bulb moment of, okay, how do we do this? And that's what led us to creating the diet templates, because we were like, well, I know what I would do as a coach. Here are the updates that I would make to get someone results. Let's just systematize it. And sort of the idea was to essentially create some algorithms that could do it as AI. And that's what our app does now. So there's several kind of aha moments along the way of just in that, like scaling your time and resources accordingly to help more people. Because really at the end of the day, like what are we really after? We want to be a spot where people that are serious about lifting, serious about improving their lives, they come to us because they know that RP works. And
Mhm.
now they can take that and use it on themselves, but also, now we've got resources where we can help, coaches get better educated. Now they can sort of take the RP principles and now spread it out to the people that they help.
Mm. Yeah, and you guys have a crazy amount of coaches involved in your system. It's phenomenal what you've built. It's a really incredible ecosystem. I highly encourage everyone to go check out what you guys have at RP. Um, I know you log all of your cardio workouts. I was going through doing my research. One of your PRs being a 6-minute 32 mile with a weighted vest on your treadmill. I don't know if that's improved since. We talked prior to recording. You hit like your 500 for 15. Any like crazy physical feats that you're super proud of that people are like, whoa, that was like legit?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it goes through certain phases.
Mm-hmm.
Back in like high school, it was all about, hey, running. And so like to me, there's maybe a couple that stand out. Running a sub 2 minute 800 meter in high school was like kind of the thing that I was most proud of. Man, that took a lot of hard work. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, I'm not very gifted sort of genetically when it comes to like sports or all that. But like the one thing that I've always had, and this is what drew me into fitness, I just love to train.
Mm.
So yeah, there's going to be people that are much more genetically gifted or whatever, but I don't know if they're willing to work as hard and do all those things. And that's why that whole idea of the slight edge principle and just putting in the work and showing up, being disciplined and all that, like that was the only chance that I ever had of, keeping up with some folks. So I've always just loved that. It's going on 20 plus years. And, I was like this morning, I woke up and I knew that it was Monday morning. I knew the workout that I had in front of me. I was just in a good mood because I was like, is it okay if I swear?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was like, God damn it, I get to go train. Like, hell yeah. I was excited. And I've been lifting for over 20 years. Like, I think that's something pretty cool. So that's one, going back to high school. And then, yeah, the 500 for 15 deadlift. I did have straps, if anyone's wondering. They were all touch and go reps. I was about 250 at the time in terms of body weight. But like, I haven't watched that video in years, but every now and again it'll like pop up somehow and I watch it and I'm like, man, that was really big at the time. But I remember how much that hurt. I remember
Hmm.
laying on the ground afterwards for like 5 minutes, just like sucking wind. So yeah, I don't know. Those are kind of two that stand out.
I get the sense that you're addicted to the idea of self-improvement, and I've heard you mention that a couple different podcasts, but what in particular are those areas that you are super addicted to? Obviously, fitness being one of them. I know you like to read 50 plus books in a year. Any books that you'd recommend for athletes listening to this right now that have stuck out to you recently?
Yeah. So Slight Edge is one.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just read one a few weeks ago. I would highly recommend. I want to say it was called The Mindful Athlete.
Okay.
It was written by a guy that used to work with the Bulls in the 90s. He worked with Jordan. Phil Jackson wrote the foreword for it. I don't know if I have the book name exactly right, but like that's one that sticks out because there's definitely a component of mindfulness that I think is really, really important for not only athletes, but really for everyone in terms of overall success or just being a better person, a better human. Those are probably two that stick out to me. There's always usually a little recency bias of like what I recommend in terms of books, like based on what I've read, the past couple months. But those are two that stand out to me.
The George Mumford, Jordan just messaged me. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. That's perks of having the audio guy behind the scenes doing all the hard work. The mindful athlete, George Mumford, for those who are listening. I'm really curious around like you've got these accolades as far as fitness. You've been able to a couple months ago. I know you were on Muscle and Fitness doing a good photo shoot. Got lean down for that. You're probably back up to maintenance now, which is another topic I'd love to maybe talk about later. But is there anything that you can attribute this like tenacious drive to constantly get better? Because I asked this for a couple reasons. Because you also mentioned about being a better human being. Because I struggle at times with those around me. They're like, man, you're always trying to do more. You're always like looking to get better, whatever. And I'm just like, that's the kind of guy I am, right? I'm hungry. I just like to work. I don't like to sit around and do nothing. That frustrates me, and I get even more worked up. So I'd love to hear kind of how you've been able to continue to see success, but also stay a good person throughout this process.
Man, seems like there's a lot to unpack there. It's as you were mentioning that, and it is tough because sometimes I'm guilty of this too. Like as you're saying it, I'm shaking my head like, yes, yes, I know exactly what that feels like. Um, it's I don't know. Some people are just born with it. Maybe I'm not sure. I think obviously you can cultivate it to some degree, absolutely. But I've never wanted to just kind of be average, mediocre. I'm just like, if you believe that you're capable of doing more, why wouldn't you want to? I mean, really want to get philosophical here. Like, what are the odds that the genetic sort of lottery would lead to you or I being here? Like it's
1 in 4 trillion, I think.
yes, exactly right. Some ridiculous number, but like, man, isn't that really cool? I just again I have more of like a long-term time horizon. I'm probably too much focused on the future of like always kind of wanting to do something to kind of create for the future, build, help people, etc., all that. So like there's definitely a little bit of a cost to it in terms of sometimes I find myself not being able to like appreciate just kind
Mm.
of like relaxing. So that's really interesting. And I've told this to my wife a little bit recently, but yeah, like, sometimes I'll even have maybe some difficulties having conversations with people because like, and this is, I'm not saying anything wrong about other people. I'm like, this is mostly just an issue that I have. Right. But it's kind of tough to just have like, I don't know,
Small talk.
yeah, I'm just like,
Yeah.
but like no one wants to come ask me, some people do, of course, but like no one wants to come ask me about like, hey, like what are you building? What are you working toward? Then I can't shut up, right? Like you asked me to get
Mm-hmm.
on this podcast, I can't shut my freaking mouth here for an hour. But like, someone wants to come up and be like, hey, what about like Jimmy and Joe from like high school? And I'm like, I I hope they're doing well, but or do other stuff. I don't know. Is that ringing bells? Am I making
Yeah, man, I can relate to it. I hope others listening. I'm the same. I actually had my girlfriend today. We were having a conversation, and my head was in the clouds as it normally is, and I'm just like spinning ideas. I'm chewing on stuff. I'm trying to think of like how it can apply, and she's like, "I want you to be present." I'm like, I don't know whether that's ever gonna happen. Like, I'm working on it. Trust me. So that's why I was more curious more than anything.
but. So I will say this. I think the idea of being able to, there's a dichotomy there for sure. And I'm still by no means very good at this, but I do think there's a way to train yourself through practicing mindfulness where you can still be very future success oriented, but at the same time being able to kind of flip a switch and being able to also enjoy the present moment.
Mm.
And I'm trying to navigate that. I think that's just part of this like human journey where you're always kind of trying to improve and do things. And so it's trying to find that balance, so to speak. I think there's definitely something to that. And like, hopefully people don't get me wrong. Like, I'm super grateful for everything that I have. And I'm always appreciative of all that. Like, just, because I came from real kind of small town roots, small town high school, all that stuff. And so like, I'm incredibly grateful, appreciative of everything that I have now. But like, there's this weird switch where I think that the two things can be true at once, right? You can be very appreciative of what you have now, but you also can just be like, not at all complacent, and you just want to keep doing. And it's almost like the Michael Jordan documentary, right? The Last Dance. I love Michael Jordan growing up, so that was like the greatest documentary in the world. I was like total nostalgia. But like that mindset that he kind of talks about of just like kind of using anything to like motivate you or kind of have a chip on your shoulder, whatever. I was just like, I was just shaking my head the whole time, like, yes, yes.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. It's something that I'm working on. That self-awareness piece is crucial because you're not going to get anywhere unless you have those people around you, right? And to your point there, you need them. One of the things you mentioned there also was the fact that you're ultimately here to help people. And back in your University of Michigan days, you received the Early Career Achievement Award, and you also helped establish a scholarship for undergraduate kinesiology students, from which you received that award. I'd love for you to share what that meant to you, that process, what University of Michigan, that education was able to provide. I'm also a sport management grad, so a nice little connection there. Rob Fraser, who's on last week's episode, is also a sport management grad. So we're just all about SPEMA here these past couple of weeks.
Yeah. And so I grew up, born and raised in the state of Michigan. I just always wanted to go to Michigan. I was always fascinated by it. I was always a huge Michigan football fan. Of course, that drew me in. So to me, I only applied to two colleges, and I only applied to the backup one just as like a worst case. But I was just like, it was never a doubt. I was like, I'm going to go to Michigan. Like, that's just where I'm going. And so, I did that. I've just always had this love and, I don't know, respect, admiration for, the university and what it stands for and all that. And again, this just goes back to, just being from like a real small hometown. Like, I'm sure like no one ever thought that, it's like, I don't know, who's that kid? Like, I don't know, whatever, just some kid, just some student. And so to like come back, this is 16 or 17, something like that, 4 or 5 years ago, to get that award, man, I'm telling you. And it's just so funny because like to my buddy Mike, like he doesn't really care about sports, and Michigan was just kind of like somewhere he went. And so like he got up and just made a bunch of jokes when he got to speak. But dude, like for me, I got choked up because I was just like, it just means so much more to me to do that. And like that's why I love giving back. And there's like a little classroom in the new kinesiology building that they have that's kind of basically named after like RP. And it's just like, it's just coming back full circle. And again, I didn't have any money growing up, or I just had to work 3 jobs or whatever to get through school. And like, if we can give back in some way, that like maybe we can give out a few scholarships per year and help kids out, like, man, why wouldn't we? You kind of, I don't know, pay it forward, so to speak. I don't know, maybe that's the right way to look at it.
100% it is. I really admire what you have been able to do. It's incredible. We're in the process of building a foundation right now here with the Athletes podcast. A similar thought process. It's if we can educate and entertain through this platform, what's that final piece, along with inspiration? It's financially supporting them, right? And as you mentioned, as I was athlete growing up, you didn't have access to those funds. You got to apply for scholarships, and like that can be a part-time job on its own, applying for scholarships. And that is how I was able to go to university and do all the things I wanted to do. Didn't have mommy and daddy paying for everything. So, that's something we want to do for others as well. So I really wanted to just shine light on what you guys have been doing because it's incredible. I want to maybe shift focus to some of the individuals that you idolized growing up. I know you've talked about Jocko Willink recently, how you've gotten involved, interested in special forces. Ronnie Coleman, obviously with the bodybuilding. Anything specifically that stood out from those individuals or any others that I didn't mention that you like grew up and you're like, I could definitely do that? Maybe MJ.
Michael Jordan's absolutely one of them. Kobe Bryant, same way.
Big ball guy, hey?
Yeah, I played a little basketball, but I'm 5'8" and not like super quick, so I was never going to be a long-term thing. But yeah, I love playing basketball. I still like watching basketball to this day and all that good stuff. But what do Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant have in common? They're like some of the most tenacious hard workers of all time. So not only were they very physically gifted, which is very cool, but there's a lot of guys out there that are physically gifted. These guys would not be outworked. They had that competitive drive, that just whatever it is. And when you take that and couple that on top of the, being physically gifted, that's how you get to like some of the best of all time. So like I always looked up to those guys. I will also say that I had a poster, and this is going to sound really funny coming from a huge Michigan football fan, but there was an ESPN the magazine, let's call it 2003 or 4. And it had a picture of David Boston. You know who David Boston is?
No. I've heard the name. I'd love for you to share it with the athletes listeners.
So he was a wide receiver. He played at Ohio State, ironically. Like I want to say he was the one that got into it with Charles Woodson in '97. They were basically, decking it out on the field. But he was like a 6'5" wide receiver, 230 pounds, running a 4.3 40. What? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I just remember they did an article about him, and they had like pictures of him basically lifting. And I saw that and I was just like, I don't know what that is, but like that. I'm never going to look like that. I know that, but I don't care. So yes, I like cut that picture out, and like that went above my old rackety weight set that was in my parents' basement. And I was like, you know what? That's going to be the motivation that sort of keeps me going. So I don't know. Those are 3 off the top of my head.
It makes me think of like a DK Metcalf. I don't know what his 40 is, but like, I don't know. He's also crushing a couple bags of candy a day. Is that what the RP app would be telling you to do? Probably not. Like, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because obviously it was a hot topic there for a bit. I am of the opinion like, hey man, great. You're genetically gifted. Incredible. Let's not go out and tell millions of people who idolize you that it's okay to eat 3 bags of candy, wait for this, whatever. And then you're like, man, like not many people can do this. Great if you can, but like intermittent fasting for 16 hours and then crushing candy, coffee, and then your 1 or 2 meals is not how to properly fuel your body. And I'd love for you, with a bit more knowledge in the nutritional background, to break it down even further.
Yeah, no, I like what you said. I think people that are really looked up to, I think, have to be careful with the message that they spread, because sometimes like, it might not mean that much to them. They're like, oh yeah, this is just kind of what I do. But yeah, a lot of people look up to that, and it's really something, because oftentimes with professional athletes, they can be successful in spite of what they do. Mm-hmm. And so when folks look up to them as kind of the role model as to what to do, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be following what they do. So you got to be real careful. And that's a slippery slope into all sorts of weird misinformation out there on nutrition. But yeah, at the end of the day, should you be eating 3 bags of candy? Probably not. Yeah, you might be able to get away with it if you are genetically gifted. I think of Chad Ochocinco, who's eating like McDonald's all the time. So is that what you want to strive for? to me, it goes back to that question, right? Of like the MJ and the Kobe Bryant. Do you think those guys were doing that?
Probably not.
Almost certainly not. And there's a reason that those guys were considered like basically two of the best athletes of all time. Chad Ochocinco was a great receiver. Don't get me wrong. He made tons of money. I'm not hating on him at all. Like, hey, respect. You were a phenomenal athlete and all that. But there's little things like that that I think separate the best from very good. And so a lot of times people have a hard time sort of seeing or noticing some of those gaps. And it goes back to what I said earlier about like the amount of time and effort it takes to kind of get up that curve of being like good to great to like very good, all-star caliber to like Hall of Famer to literally you are like the one or two best of all time in your sport. Like there's a big difference to get up that curve.
Yeah, Jordan just messaged that DK's 40-yard dash was 4.33, so David Boston got him by a couple milliseconds there.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Same, just physical specimens. Like, man, are they even human? I have no idea. They could be a robot, and I think, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Even I remember a story. It's on Instagram a bunch, but about Kobe Bryant, who's had a guy who was in the gym on the opposing team, and he made sure that he didn't leave until that other guy was done. And like half an hour later, despite the fact it only being an hour before game time, he's like, I want to make sure I'm going to outwork you no matter what it takes, no matter who you are. And that's the mentality it requires. Nick, I've just enjoyed this episode tremendously. We do have a couple questions here from LinkedIn. It's part of a new series I'm trying to stir up. One of the questions is from Parker Olson, who's the founder of Fjorgy. It's a granola company. He's curious what the 20% that we can do to influence the 80% of how we feel / function. Did I do a good job asking that one?
Yeah. No, I get it. Like, what are kind of the main things you should be doing?
Yes. The big rocks.
Yeah. So that's actually how we lay things out in terms of our nutritional priorities. So we have a pyramid. It used to just be this chart that kind of laid it out, but we changed it to a pyramid. So if you're looking to lose weight or gain weight, basically the two main things you want to focus on before you get into all the little nitty-gritty details is your calorie balance. So calories in versus calories out. That's going to be the most important thing, probably about 50% of your success right there. And then from there, it comes down to your macronutrient split. And this is especially for performance and changing your body composition, which, if this is the Athletes Podcast, that's what people want. So really, it's those two things. It's not the nutrient time. It's not the supplements. It's not the food quality even, which surprises a lot of people. But it's the calories and the macros. So those are the two big things. If you focus there, yeah, you've got 80% of your success.
Wild. Okay, let's follow that up. Is there a supplement that you would recommend to the average person? What's your number one supplement?
Can I give more than one?
Yeah, please.
Okay, cool. So there's basically like five good ones that we recommend that have a lot of research behind them. And I'll say this with a caveat. You don't have to use supplements, but let's be honest, people live busy lives. Things get out of control, super busy all over the place. So supplements are super convenient. Whey protein, great thing to have around training. Casein protein, you're going to go a long time without eating, before bed, it's a good thing to have. Workout carbohydrates. So for athletes, especially if you're training more than an hour, training a couple hours a day or multiple times per day, having something like sports drink while you work out helps set the stage for that next productive workout, whether it's the next day or later that day. And you'll notice those three things is protein, carbs. So it's like, are those really even supplements? Kind of just food, but in a easier to digest format. Mm-hmm. And then 4 and 5 would be creatine monohydrate and caffeine. Can be nice. A good performance enhancer.
Yeah, creatine, the benefits are insane. Everyone, I've noticed crazy amounts of publications that are mentioning the benefits for the elderly population, youth, athletes, you name it, whether it's cognitive function and physical, there's tremendous benefits. A little bit more detailed question. Carlos Naranjo from Clearco asks, number one, for triathletes looking to cross-train, would you recommend a 1 rep max percentage training or velocity-based training?
It's actually a really good question. I probably don't have great answer for that. I don't know too much about endurance stuff. One of my colleagues, Dr. Alex Harrison, is just basically world leading expert in endurance and endurance training and all that stuff. I'd actually have to ask. I'd have to ask him. I mean, I can
Okay.
certainly ask him and get an answer and get it back to you. But if I were to attempt to answer that, I would be literally making it up. So I'm gonna. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, we'll table it. No problem. That's what we can do here. Hey, also, anything benefits from fasted to unfasted workouts?
So I would never recommend. Well, man, that's just such a loaded question. I feel like we could spend 20 minutes talking about that. So I think it depends on the time of day that someone trains. If you're training, 5, 6 in the morning, you're probably going to be fasted
Mhm.
because no one's going to wake up at 3 a.m. I mean, maybe Kobe Bryant would, right? But very few people are going to do that. So you can sort of limit that where maybe you take your workout shake that's got like a little bit of whey protein and some simple carbs in it, like sports drink. You just sip on it on the way to the gym. And that's easy. It's not going to, sit heavy in your stomach. And then you just have a little bit of something in your system. Definitely could use, caffeine pre-workout that early in the morning, just to kind of help get you going. But yeah, outside of that really early morning training, if you have time to get in a meal and you can wait a couple hours before training, well, that's what I would recommend. I wouldn't, like, if you're training, especially late morning to any time later in the day, I wouldn't recommend fasted training. I don't think it's going to be beneficial.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't recommend it. But then again, like, there's always a caveat of like sometimes special circumstances do apply. So
Yeah.
There's a lot of variables in that one. I'm curious also. I work out typically in my mornings. It's just a good way for me to start my day. I do it fasted, but I'm really using the fuel from last night's meal. It's not like I'm going in there completely empty. So and I'm usually getting in my pre-workout prior to that. Follow up to that. What's your favorite workout? I guess. Yeah, so it's Kevin asked the question, who's the social media manager for Manscaped, so I wanted to get it in here. And I'm assuming his question meant more, what is your favorite exercise, that being bench press, deadlift, squat?
yeah, I'll say bench press.
Really? Okay, interesting. PR on bench?
I was never a great bench presser. I want to say maybe like probably the best bench I ever did was like 315 for 10. And that was, when I was pretty big back in the day, like,
Yeah.
240, 250, something like that.
Yeah, I was never good. I just 315 for 10, no big deal. Jeez.
So, well, this is really interesting. So I have this probably huge flaw where, like, in any one particular area that I'm interested in, I always compare myself to like the best.
Right.
So you're like, well, I don't know, it wasn't that great, because I think in my head, I'm like, well, all these power lifters can do, 600, 500, 400, whatever. Like, I don't think I've actually ever benched more than 365, but like, I don't know, I was, usually pretty good at doing reps or whatever. So like in my head, that's how I always do it. Oh my God, it's who you compare yourself to, right? So that makes a big difference.
Yeah, perspective is everything. I think that it actually brings up a good point. You said you're always good at reps. Is that just your willpower powering you through it?
I think there's something to be said of muscle fiber type too. So
Okay.
I was never like a great sprinter.
Mm.
I was never great at super long distances, even though I did run cross country, but I was always pretty good in that middle area. The
Interesting.
400, the 800, the 1600 meter, kind of that mid distance is usually where I would do a little bit better, because I wasn't super fast and I wasn't probably built for endurance. So I was kind of trying to find that middle ground.
Very interesting. I love it. Hey, I have a couple more questions, Nick, but I just wanted to make sure I really appreciate your time here for this show. It means a lot, and I know that everyone listening, watching, wherever they're consuming the AP are going to really take a lot of value from this conversation. But before we let you go, Max Lugavere brought up a crazy point on a recent show that the average American consumes 77 grams of added sugar per day in their diet. And I'd love for you, having analyzed or viewed the data points over a decade of probably hundreds of thousands of people, what the biggest item that you've noticed that people should address in their daily diet to get back to a healthier state?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk to some simple like habit stuff that's just, hey, you don't want to get into counting your macros or anything too crazy. Like, what's one simple thing you could do? Oh, yeah, check what you're drinking in terms of calories per day. This is especially true if you could probably hear this example all the time. Hey, I gave up drinking soda. I'm talking regular soda, not diet soda. You give that up, and imagine if you're drinking 3 or 4 cans of soda a day. It's 40 grams of sugar per can. Like, dude, that's 160 grams of carbs. That's 640 calories a day. If you cut that out, like, you instantly start losing weight. And then not only that, but you improve so many different health things. So there's definitely something to that. Imagine, my goodness, I am not like a huge coffee person. I got a little bit into it more recently, so I'll maybe do like an iced coffee, something like that. Imagine the people that go into Starbucks and it's basically like you're basically drinking ice cream. Like, what? Like, get out of here. That thing's got 500 calories, 1,000 calories. So you just don't even notice because you're drinking it. It doesn't usually fill you up. What does it do if it's filled with sugar? We probably are even more hungry, more ravenous, have more cravings. So absolutely, that's just such an easy thing that people could do to give up.
Yeah, it's so true. Nick Shaw, we could talk for hours. I'm just giggling at some of the stuff that I've learned over the past 60 minutes here, but I'd love for you to answer the way we wrap up every episode by asking our guests what their biggest piece of advice to the next generation of athletes is. And given your knowledge, expertise, and wisdom in the space, I'm sure you've got an incredible answer to this.
Sure. So I would say think long term. You're not going to be successful overnight. You're not going to add 50 pounds to your bench, squat, or deadlift tomorrow. You're not going to put on 5-10 pounds of muscle. You're not going to drop a tenth or 2/10 of a second on your 40 by tomorrow. It takes time, it takes effort. You got to keep showing up. You got to keep putting in that work day in, day out, not just for weeks, not just for months on end, for literally years on end. And until you've done that for 5 or 10 years, I don't even want to hear it. Like, don't even stop. Like, no, go put in the work for 5-10 years and then let's talk. All right. But so many people overlook that, right? Social media, everyone wants to be successful. Oh, I want to show all my PRs and all the highlights because I want the likes and all the glitz and the glam. Stop. No, go put in the work for 5 or 10 years. Just shut up and get to work. That's where the magic happens. But that's not magic, right? No one wants to admit that. So there you go. There's the magic. There's a secret sauce right there. Just a
So
slight
true.
edge principle. Slight edge principle.
Oh, I love it, man. I'm ready to run through a wall. I'm fired up, to say the least. Nick, where can people find you on social media so that they can get fired up on a daily basis?
Yeah, at RP Strength is our company Instagram. That's where most people know about us from. I'll also say, for everyone on this podcast listening, go to YouTube, Renaissance Periodization, Dr. Mike Israetel. There is so much free educational content there around nutrition, around training, especially for like hypertrophy, so like gaining muscle. It's basically like getting a college education for free, and it's all there on our YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is blowing up. There's so much information. Go watch that. I guarantee if you're interested in getting stronger, getting more muscle, anything like that, you're going to love the RP YouTube channel. And, I'd say, hey, my own Instagram too, at nick.shaw.rp.
There you go. Listen to that. Hey, look up the RP app. Send him a photo now. Send him another photo in 10 years with your progress, and I'm sure he'll give you a little pat on the back with that hard work and success put in. Nick, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, man.
I tell you what, if anyone sends me a before and after that's 10 years difference, and they're like, hey, remember that one time I listened to that podcast? Man, I will hook you up if that, so I'll say, come 2032, if someone sends me that picture, I'll make sure you're hooked up.
Book it. I love it. Thanks, man. Appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, folks, for tuning into the 133rd episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Nick Shaw. Big ups goes to him for coming on the show, sharing his time with you folks who were listening. I was very fortunate, privy to be firsthand asking him the questions and getting to answer some of the ones that I have myself. I mean, hey, we're all on this fitness journey together. For those who have been around for these 133 episodes, we sincerely appreciate you for coming along for the ride. For those who are just starting, buckle up because it's only getting better from here on in. The journey is the struggle. If you took one thing from this episode, make sure you know that work ethic cannot be replaced I'm going to end this episode with a quote from Emmett Smith that I listened to thanks to Eric Thomas, little motivational speech. All people are created equal. Some people work harder in preseason. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.